Hi and welcome to this little tutorial or overview of deep compositing and deep images. We're going to render a very simple scene with Maya Arnold, and we're going to comp it in Nuke using DeepEXR data. So this is just a very simple overview. I'm going to comp sphere into cube. Together I'm going to show some of the things that you can do in deep compositing. I'm going to add some fog in post-production, and I'm going to go a bit into keying and into adding live action footage between CG elements that have been rendered as DeepEXRs using holdouts. Do not be shocked, the resulting image is not exactly beautiful, but this is more about the techniques involved and some of the tips and tricks that you have to keep in mind when working with deep data. Usually I would not suggest deep data for every project, but there are times where they do come in very handy. In a nutshell, and very unscientifically speaking, deep data stores your image samples in deep space, so with a depth. So you actually do have a position for your samples, and you can use it in a kind of pseudo 3D way in the compositing application, which does come in handy if you, for example, need to place objects between objects in a frame that you've rendered, or have to combine object data or hard surface data with volume data at a later stage, not during rendering. So you will get a good overview of what deep images are watching this little overview, and there are a lot of resources online. So without further ado, let's get started. This is our scene, a sphere in the cube. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just do a little quick test render in Arnold. And of course we can't see anything because I haven't added the skylight yet. So let me just quickly add a physical sky and turn up the intensity to 4. And this is basically the image that we're going to be working with. I'm going to up the samples, primary samples, to 6. And yeah, this is it, nothing fancy, but it gets the job done. Just going to add a few more divisions to the sphere because I don't like low poly spheres. Yes, this is our first scene setup. There's actually not much you have to do to in a DeepEXR from Maya. You have to switch the output driver to DeepEXR and the image format. We can actually leave all settings at default and give our image a name, which is going to be Deep Image Sphere Cube, I guess. So basically, that's it. I'm just going to go to the render view, do a quick snapshot of my perspective viewport, hit render, and let Arnold do its thing. Now, skipping the boring rendering part, we're going to switch to Nuke and bring in our very first deep data. So I'm going to drag and drop our rendered EXR file here, and this is just a standard Nuke read node. This is no deep data. The file stores the deep data, but the standard read node does not read deep data from the file. So instead, we're going to also create a deep read node, and you can create it with the tab shortcut and navigate to deep read and bring in the very same EXR file that we've brought in as image data. Or you can also use the pop-up menu and find the deep menu, and there you'll find all the nodes for manipulating deep image data in Nuke. So creating the deep read, we're now going to bring in our deep data. So deep data is a different kind of data format in Nuke, so it is actually not compatible with 2D image manipulation. You can exchange 2D and deep image data by converting a deep image into a flat 2D image, or by creating a kind of flat card from 2D data and bring it into deep space. So the deep environment is kind of like a full 3D environment. You can actually take a look at deep data in Nuke's 3D viewport by converting it to points. And there's a certain subset of functions in Nuke that you can use on deep data. There are various nodes, for example, cropping or basic color correction on deep data, which we're going to take a look at right now. But let's first take a look at our rendered image in 3D space. For this, I'm going to create a deep to points node. And you can immediately see that our actual render data turns up in the viewport, in the new 3D viewport. And you can change a few settings, like, for example, how many image samples you want to take, how many points you want to show, the point size, etc. And you can see that you can actually tumble around your rendered image. You can, of course, not see behind objects because those would be samples that the renderer didn't sample. And you can take a look at it in the 2D viewport and see that it actually is the rendering that we rendered in Arnold. So since this is 3D data, we can, for example, take a slice of this data to kind of like isolate an object. And for that, we're going to create a deep crop node, which lets you define a range in which you want to discard or show the image samples. So this is like a Z clipping plane. So if I set it to 1 to 22, it's going to show my whole scene because my objects are somewhere within 1 to 20 in camera space distance from the camera. So I might as well reduce the depth, the ZFAR depth, so I'm going to take it down to 9, and if we take it down to 9, we can see that we have actually isolated our sphere. So we can actually slice the deep data by the depth. So I could create another deep crop node, and I will isolate the cube behind the sphere. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna use a different range. So we're gonna use, instead of 1 to 9, we're gonna use the range 9 to 22. And as we can see, we've isolated the cube. Obviously, you can't see the samples that were behind the sphere of the cube, but this lets us define different objects based by the distance from camera. So taking a look at the actual image representation of the deep data, we can see that we have an isolated sphere with an actually clean alpha and an isolated cube in two different streams or trees, so we can actually manipulate them differently. Switching the deep to points nodes between them lets us view both in 3D space. We can bring them back together with a deep merge node, which I've just created, which basically brings back our original data. So the merge in deep compositing is like a merge in 2D space, in that it combines a few different deep data streams within Nuke. So I'm just going to quickly rename our deep crop nodes so that we know which is which. So I'm going to name this deep crop cube crop, and this one is going to be deep crop sphere crop. And if you're using uppercase S, you might as well use an uppercase C for the cube, just to keep it consistent. So now that we've got both objects isolated, we can actually add something to the cube like a deep color correct. This is one of the very few actual image manipulation nodes that you can use in deep compositing, which is the standard Nuke color correct, although operating on deep data. However, a single color correct node is pretty limited. So what you want to do is you might want to color your deep information with 2D image data that you've color corrected or changed. So for that, we're going to use a deep recolor node, which takes in 2D image data input and basically colors the depth samples that you have from your rendering with another image. In this case, it's the very same image that we've brought in as a 2D image. However, we can now use, for example, a grade node or any other standard Nuke image node to manipulate the color data in the stream. So using the gamma to shift its color, we can actually see that we're changing the cube's color. So obviously, this is just a very simple example. To get the point across, you can do a lot of things, well, basically everything you can do in compositing on your objects, and then recolor your deep points. And as you can see, our resulting image works. The sphere is perfectly isolated, it has correct anti-aliasing, the cube is behaving as we would expect, without the problems that you sometimes get from object buffer alphas, where you can find solutions to, but this gives us a kind of new flexibility to actually manipulate our deep data. So I'm just quickly going to rename the format 960 by 540 that came in to render image format, so that I can reuse it, because this is the resolution we're going to be working with in our data stream, in our Nuke tree. So I've just created a reformat node because I want to create a rotor shape and I want to inherit the render format 960 by 540 to show something else that you can do with deep data. So I'm just going to create a RotoPaint node, just a standard RotoPaint 2D node. Do I draw a curve? No, I'm just going to use an ellipse. I'm going to draw a circle or something circle-ish, and I've got it overlaid on my image to know where I'm actually positioning it. Setting the viewer to the RotoPaint node, this is just the standard RotoPaint circle white color, white alpha, and I can actually turn that into deep data. So there's a node that lets me do this, which is conveniently called deep from image. So this lets me connect a 2D image input, and I can do one very important thing with it. I can specify a zdef for this image. So this is like a plane in a certain distance from the camera, and I can, for example, use it to create a deep holdout. So a holdout, like in 2D image manipulation, is basically just punching a hole in your rendering in this case. So with the RotoPaint converted to a deep image and connected to the deep holdout and specifying zdef, I can actually move my circle in deep space. So I can use it as a holdout. And as you can see, it can intersect the sphere if its depth is within the range of the sphere. Obviously, we do not get a correctly anti-aliased border at the intersection because the renderer didn't take enough samples there. But we can punch a hole in the cube with it if we place the circle between the sphere and the cube, and just creating a checkerboard node to check out if the punching a hole actually worked. We're going to use a standard image merge after the holdout, since the deep holdout produces standard image data as its output, so it converts deep to image. And as we can see, we can actually look through the cube, but we have the sphere completely isolated and intact, and we can still move the circles in 3D space and punch a few different holes in our renderings. So this comes in handy if you want to combine your deep data with 2D image data, or if you want to place 2D objects between your 3D objects that you've rendered. This is possible with the deep holdout, which is a very, very useful tool to use with deep data. So as I've mentioned, the deep holdout actually produces 2D image data as its output. And of course, you don't have to use a deep holdout node to create 2D data from your deep stream. So you can use a node that is conveniently called deep to image, which basically converts your deep stream to do 2D image data, which is fully compatible with all of Nuke's 2D image manipulation functions. This is basically the reverse function to deep from image. Now, while this is fine for manipulating solid objects, a common case for deep compositing is actually combining volume data with actual 3D image data, deep image data. So to show volume and solid interaction, I'll switch back to Maya, and I'm going to create something like ground fog to render out and combine with our image without using any holdout mask in the renderer, without using compositing tricks to actually combine the two elements, but just two separate deep images which can be combined flawlessly. So switching back to Maya, I'm just going to do a quick check of the render settings and do a test render again to make sure that we didn't do something stupid with our scene, like moving a camera or something similar, and we didn't. So I'm going to create a fluid shape in Maya and set its type to density type to gradient. And then I'm just going to adjust the density curve, and I'm going to use a Y gradient for that so that we can actually get something like a ground fog. So sure that this does not look really aesthetically pleasing, but again, it gets the job done. So we can see that it actually works. And we want to render this out as deep image as well. So I'm going to name it deep image fog, and I'm not going to change anything else, but I'm going to hide all of our shapes. So what we get is basically just a rendering of fog without any holdout, without anything, just deep data of a fog volume. So I skipped the rendering, and our rendering is done. It took a while because volumes, well, take a while to render as deep data especially. So having done that, I can bring it in again. So I'm going to first grab my color information with a standard read node. And in addition to that, I'm going to create a deep read and bring it in again. I'm just doing this for convenience and overview. I could actually just read the deep node only and convert it to an image and then use that. But I'd like to have two separate streams, like a deep stream and an image stream, to use in combination with each other. So I just created a deep to points, and we can see our fog as a volume or a 3D representation. It currently doesn't look nice in the Nuke 3D viewport. It doesn't have to, but rest assured, when combined with the rest of our image, it will basically look exactly like a beauty rendering if we rendered out the sphere, the cube, and the fog together. So to combine the fog together with the deep data that we already have, we're going to use a deep merge node again. And we're going to wire its input to the fog. In this case, because it's 3D data, the A and B input don't have any kind of direction or layer the one thing over the other. As you can see, our fog and our sphere and our cube integrate perfectly. So if I create a deep to points node and hook it up to the merge, we can see in the 3D viewport an accurate, or more or less accurate, representation of our current 3D scene. And as we can see in the 2D representation, the fog actually blends with the objects as we expect, even though it was just a plain fog layer without any alpha matters to punch a hole in it to free the objects or be able to compose the objects. So of course, with a deep recolor node, we can also recolor the fog. And as we see, color manipulation works as expected, even on volume. And just to show that the rendering is clean and with alpha, we're going to layer this image over the checkerboard with a standard image merge node at the end. So the next thing that we might want to take a look at is whether our holdouts actually work with volume, and we can check that easy enough. We still have our circle holdout ready to test it, and I'm just going to hook the holdout up to the deep merges output. And as we can see, the circle is behind the sphere in front of the cube, and it's somewhat sunk into the volume, and it looks as we expect. It seems like the fog is going around the circle. If I move it to the front, with the deep from image node, we can see that it just intersects the fog barely. If we move it down a little bit, we can see that it actually sinks into the volume and gets correctly combined. So if we were to layer an object under the holdout, the fog would layer correctly in front and behind a 2D object that we're using behind the holdout. And in fact, the next step in this little overview, we're going to do exactly that. And so I probably want to dive into a bit of keying, a bit of despilling, just because it fits the subject. It's not strictly deep compositing, it's just standard compositing, but the same rules apply to deep compositing, so I'm just going to do a quick comp example. So now we're just going to do some compositing using footage that I've downloaded from HollywoodCameraWork.us, which is a great resource for learning green screen. The footage that I have is quite old, so it's still, I think it's not an SD, it's a little bit larger, but it's either blown up SD or down converted for internet presentation. It's not the cleanest footage. Because it's actually not the best footage in terms of the actual raw quality, it's actually really good footage to get into compositing and green screen work. So to start our little green screen endeavor, we're gonna bring in the footage that we'll be working with today, which is this sequence. I'm just gonna drag and drop the very first frame. The sequence is a girl with a gun surrounded by green, which is totally awesome, totally fun to shoot. And since you've only brought in the first frame, I'm going to reload the sequence and take the whole sequence, and we're on frame 375, which we'll be working with today. We're not going to care for the whole sequence, we're just going to be working with this frame, because this is about DeepEXR principles. So the first thing that I notice is that the pixel aspect of the footage seems to be wrong. So it was probably shot NTSC, so a scale factor of 1.2 in the width should be right, but we don't care for this right now, so I'm just going to blast this transform away. And now, taking a look at the footage, the very first thing that we notice is that there are a lot of tracking markers on the green. And they're great and they are useful, but they can potentially bite us during keying, so we want to get rid of them. And we don't actually have to do this right now because the footage is quite low res and you could probably get away with only a single keyer node. But I'd like to show a bit of, just a very little bit of standard workflows while keying. So this is one of the ways you can go about this. And the way I'm going about this in this case is nowhere near perfect or what you would actually do in production, but it shows the principles of how to create a quite clean green screen alpha mask using more than one keylight nodes and a couple of utility nodes in between to create a more or less clean alpha matic for our talent. So I'm going to start by creating a keylight node and then just picking a green color that I think will help us eliminate most of the green screen within the footage. So taking a look at the alpha, this seems to be our best candidate for shade of green. And as you can see, our talent is quite isolated in almost black, so we're going to fix that by just creating a grade node and setting it to operate only on the alpha. We're going to change the gamma, and we're going to change the white point to just crash the values heavily to get a clean white mask for the actress while keeping everything else black. So with this first simple mask, we want to copy it over to our actual RGB image data. So we're going to do that by using a shuffle copy node. And we're going to attach a pre-mul of the shuffle copy to get pre-multiplication working. And as we can see, the talent is isolated quite well. There's a green outline around her, which we don't care for right now. In fact, we want to erode it a little bit because the goal of this first keying exercise is to actually have her in front of a clean green screen without tracking markers, which we then can use further down the tree without having to worry about all the markers potentially not being picked up by the keyers. But as I said, this is only about the rough principles, so we don't have to do this in this case, but I like to show the technique. So the next thing that we want to do is actually create a clean green screen for her. And to do that, in this case, we're just going to use a blur node. There are other ways to get a clean green screen. You might also use the IBK color gizmo node to do that, but in this case, a blur will be enough. So I'm just going to set it to a very, very high value to basically just smear the image into one giant wall of green, and we're just going over the images. I'm going to reorder the node tree here a little bit to make it a bit more compact, and we've actually wired the merge node wrong, so I have to switch its inputs because the background is B, foreground is A input. And as you can see, we do have her in front of a clean green screen right now. So this is what we're going to work with further down the tree to create our actual keys. Normally you would probably use at minimum 3 keys, maybe 4, maybe keys for different areas of the green screen. In this case, basically 1 key will be enough for us. So I'm just going to create another key light node, and I'm going to select a tone, a green tone that gives me the best overall key right now. I do not want to crush this key right now. Instead, I'd like to create a second key, which is derived from the first key, to just isolate areas within the talent so that we get a clean white alpha mask inside the talent without crushing our borders too much. So I'm just going to use the delay node and then the rate node again. I'm going to crush the whites, maybe erode it not as much, and blur it just a little bit so that we don't get that much aliasing, which would be okay in this case. And I want to combine the 2 alpha channels, so I'm going to use a channel merge, which will basically add the 2 alphas together. And as you can see, we're keeping the soft edge of our initial key, and by eroding the inside mask in our out, we can control how much the softness extends. So we don't want to erode it too much because we have want to have a clean alpha for our talent. This is kind of the way that you would go about this, only that you'd be using more keys in production. Our key will definitely not be perfect for this example. There will be an outline, which we can get rid of later. But for just compositing into our example of DeepEXR image. So there's still a bit of garbage around our actress. So I'm just going to quickly create a garbage mask with a rotor shape down here. You would probably not want to have it in the stream, but having it wire in from the sides, because usually garbage masks are animated, might change, and there might be blending between different masks. And as you can see, it actually doesn't work for other frames, but we'll just leave it at that. And we're gonna create a shuffle copy node because we want to copy our alpha to our image data, because we want to do despilling separately on our footage. We won't actually care about that right now. I might show a bit of setup later, but we're just going to use the pre-malt. And as we can see, the talent is isolated okay-ish. However, there's an outline around her, and due to the quality of the footage, it's actually quite hard to get rid of it. There are ways with using the background in conjunction with an outside mask to multiply the background image with the color information at the edges. We can also crush the key a little bit, which I definitely don't like to do because you want to keep soft keys, but I guess in this case we can just keep it crushed a very little bit. And creating a checkerboard and setting it to a root image format, we can actually test the key in front of the background, and since our background will be actually quite light and not dark, this might actually work quite well in this case. And as you can see, it actually works. Considering that this is SD material, she's pretty soft. It actually works okay. There's obviously a lot of spill, which we have to care about separately. We can go the simple way just to test how it works, especially on the edges, because we might actually be able to get rid of the green there. So we're going to use a hue correct, and we're going to use the green suppress to actually suppress the green colors. And as you can see, it actually works on the edges quite well. So this might actually be useful after all. However, it still does not work for the inside areas of the actress. You can still see a lot of spill on her face. But I'm gonna show a way to deal with this a little bit later. So we're just gonna deactivate the hue correct now and get back to our deep image data and try to get our real life footage somewhere between the sphere and the cube. So the very first thing I'm going to do, just to keep things a bit organized, I'm just going to drop a background around our key nodes, call it key. I'll give the background node the green color, which I like to do for green screens and blue screens or any other color. Usually next to the DeSpill tree. For this example, this works, and well, the script is kind of half organized, half chaotic anyway, so this will have to do. And the first thing we want to do is we want to bring our green screen footage into the format that we're using, which is 960 by 540 with a reformat node. And the next thing that we want to care about is our deep image data stream, and we still have the deep holdout node, which we had before. So we're going to use that, and we're going to put a merge after it because we've got image data. And I'm going to add a constant. I'm just going to create something bluish thingy, sky-like, whatever, just to not composite against black. So now I'm just going to add a transform before our reformat, and I'm quickly going to take care of the pixel aspect ratio because it kind of bothers me. So 1.2, and she doesn't look as thin as she did before. I think this is right, about 1.2, if it's shot NTSC. So yes, the next thing there is to create is the deep from image node, which we're going to use to turn our green screen stream into deep data. So as we can see, it does not work unless we specify the Z-def of our actor plane. And in this case, I'm going to set it to 9, which is halfway, more or less halfway between the sphere and the cube. And as we can see, the holdout actually works great. There's a hole punched within our whole deep image stream. If we move the actress a bit to the side, we can see that it actually works correctly. There's fog overlaying the actor, the sphere is overlaying the actor, the cube is behind the actress. So our general setup works. And now we have to care for combining this deep image with our actual 2D footage of our actress. So the next thing I want to do is create a merge node under our deep holdout, and I'm going to connect our green screen tree to the B input and the holdout to the A input. However, if we take a look at the resulting picture, we can see that there's actually something we didn't expect. She looks very black and crushed wherever she's overlaying the cube. So there seems to be a problem somewhere in the tree that is actually resulting in an incorrect blending of our two images. So we have to identify the source of this, and this is most likely the alpha channel that we created for the actress, because when using the union operation on the channels and when merging the alpha channels, we did not care for the actual values that were created. But if we take a look at the alpha channel and at the alpha values right next to the RGB values down here, and if we move our mouse over the alpha channel, we can see that there are actually values above 1, and that is not correct for an alpha channel. An alpha channel basically just displays the opacity of an image. So it has to be in the 0 to 1 range because there's no opacity above 1. So we have to find out where this is actually coming from. Looking at our initial key light, we can see that the values are staying below 1. And looking at the delay, we can see it's still below 1. But we have a gray node. And we are really crushing the whites here. So it's 0.09. And if we take a look at the resulting color values, you can see that they're actually far above 1. They're 8, 7.9. So we have to clamp that to get this back into the 0 to 1 range. And if we count that, we can see that our alpha for the actress is actually 1. And the union of the two alpha channels actually doesn't produce values above 1 anymore. So having done that, I'm taking a look at the resulting image, we should see that the image actually now gets blended correctly, as we would expect. There are no color artifacts, the fog is overlaid correctly. If we deactivate the clamp, we can see that immediately the image looks, well, weird basically, and we do not want that. So keep in mind, and when combining alpha channels, that the values have to stay below 1. So after we've taken care of that, we want to take a look at the resulting picture. And as you can see, the blending now works as expected. She's sitting right behind the sphere, in front of the cube. She sinks into the fog, and this is the result that we can obtain from deep compositing, basically. But there's a problem. So we see that there's a faint white outline or bluish outline around our actress. And if we take a look at the alpha channel, we can actually see that there's this thin black line at the edge where the foreground and our actor background meet. And this is not much of a problem, we can fix it. You just have to be aware of it. So the reason this is happening is because the merge operation that we're using over is actually not suited for the type of operation that we're doing. So the over operation assumes that you've got a completely filled background object, which has no alpha. So you've got a clean background, it's just color information, and there's a foreground being layered over it. So this foreground has an alpha channel. So what it does is it takes the inverse of the alpha channel and multiplies the background with this. So wherever the foreground object is above 0 in the alpha, the inverse gets multiplied with the background. So it actually punches a hole in the background wherever the foreground object is visible, and it then just adds and does a plus operation to combine the background and the foreground. In this case, this does not work because this hole is already punched in. So we've got a foreground, which is a standard pre-multiplied image, and we've got a background, which is not a filled image, but it already has the hole for the alpha of the foreground already punched in, so there's black information. So the over operation does the multiplication with the inverse of the foreground alpha again. So we're basically double fading the outline on the background layer. So this is not what we want. Actually, both images are pretty simple to combine in this case because they've already been completely correctly being prepared for just merging them, but we have to merge them with either a plus operation or something that is called a disjoint over. In this case, we could just use plus, which would work perfectly. Or let me rephrase that. Plus would work perfectly for the edges of the actors that are basically in front of the cube. So if we switch to plus right here, we can see that it actually gives us the correct edge behavior in this case. However, taking a look at the sphere in the foreground, we can see that it actually does not work with a plus operation. So the disjoint over operation is basically the right operation to use whenever you want to insert elements between elements. So if you've got a background and you've got a hole punched in it and you want to just overlay another image, which is basically the hole inverted, the plus operation will give you the correct result. In this case, there's also foreground elements within our layered image. So just adding the colors in these foreground areas will make our foreground basically see-through, because we're just adding color values, and this is not what we want in this case. So disjoint over is the correct type of operation for this combination of images. So in the end, I'm using disjoint over in this case and not add, because I want to make clear to myself and to a potential other user of the script what my intent is. And in this case, my intent is to do an over operation, and I want to make this clear, and I would use disjoint over for a case where plus would work perfectly as well, but I'm also using disjoint over in this case because plus will give us the incorrect result. So after this lengthy explanation, I'm sorry for that, but I do read these questions about fringe edges and stuff very, very often. I discuss them with people, and the fact is that there is a solution to most of those outline problems. If you know what the compositing software is actually calculating in certain cases. So this is nothing complicated. But I thought it might be interesting. So as a proof of concept and to show the general techniques that actually works. However, I told you that I'd like to show you a way to deal with the green spill, which is one of many ways to actually handle spill and to actually maybe even use spill to your own advantage. Considering the totally not awesome image that we just created, we definitely don't have to do that, but I do get questions regarding despilling a lot, so I might just take a bit of time and show a very, very simple technique to actually use spill, to change spill to a color that you want, because it is an important part of the compositing process. We definitely don't have to do that right now, but I just hate the spill on her, so I'm just going to show a simple technique to deal with that as more or less the last step in this short overview of deep compositing. Yeah, let's do that right now. I kind of want to isolate the green color, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a key light again, but this time instead of picking a color, I'm just going to set its green input to 1. And taking a look at the image, that we can see that basically eliminated all of the green content from the image. So we basically have our source footage without any green in it. So to isolate the actual green colors in the image, we can basically just take the difference between the two images. So I'm going to create a merge node and set its operation to difference. I'm going to wire in our original footage and the key light that we just created. And the difference is basically everything that's green in the image. So what we actually lost in our keyed image is actually a lot of light contribution. In eliminating the green colors, not the green channel, but the green color contribution in the image, it got darker, it got more muddy, and we usually want to keep the lighting as it was, maybe not always on a pure green screen stage, but if you have to insert your actor into a virtual environment that might be outside and blue, you would probably want to keep the spill and just change its color. So that we can actually do. First of all, we can now create another merge node and set its operation to plus. And if we wire in difference with our keyed image, we actually get back the image that we had before. So if we switch between the input and the output, we can see that the image actually hasn't changed. We've recreated our image, but what we did is we created a different stream, an isolated green channel that we can actually manipulate. In this case, for example, we can desaturate it with a saturation node, and we can see that the light spill now actually is gray, as if she was in a white or gray environment. And we can change the saturation. However, saturation is often not what we want, but we want to change the actual color that is built on here. So if we change the heat in the image, you can see that we are actually creating and turning our green spill into blue spill, magenta spill, red spill, whatever color you want. Now, this of course looks very unnatural, but we can basically do every color operation that we want on this isolated green contribution channel. So if we desaturate it a bit, the colors might actually feel more natural. And looking at our resulting image, even if it's still probably the worst image I've ever composited, it looks like a 90s chessboard rendering, but worse. Anyway, it is what it is. You can see that her face, the color actually sits more in the environment because there's this kind of blue sky thingy within the image. It works a lot better. And I kind of like this way to control spill in the image and to actually use it. There are situations where you want to eliminate it completely, but oftentimes it works pretty well to just isolate the green colors and see what you can do with them. So the very last thing I want to take a look at is color corrections, because there's often some questions regarding outlines or fringes when color correcting parts of an image. In this case, if we color correct the fog, I've actually missed a very important step. I didn't check a checkbox that I should have checked. And if we now correct the color, we can see that there's this white outline coming in. And this is because we're working on the pre-multiplied layer, and we have to actually demultiply it, do our color transformations, and then pre-multiply it again with the alpha to actually get rid of the outline. This is very important. There are operations in a lot of compositing programs that do rely on you keeping track of your pre-multiplications. So keep in mind that whenever you're gamma correcting an image, color correcting any image that is pre-multiplied and has an alpha, you have to demultiply it, you have to do your color operations, and you have to pre-multiply it again at the end of all those operations. So basically, this was it. It turned into a bit more than just a quick overview of deep compositing. But anyway, I hope this was interesting for at least some of you. And have a good day. Bye.